Hi everyone, and welcome back to another short video on something to help you with your IELTS. So let me just move myself around a little bit. Okay, so this video just goes over a particular question that you will be given when presented with kind of visual data, a graph of some sort. There are 5 types, and this would be a line graph, and this depicts radio television audiences in the UK over a period of time. So let's go through it. So there's a couple of things that I wanted to iron over with you. The most important thing is that you detect the behavioural patterns of each line. Something to remember with this type of question, and in fact with all the data types of questions, regardless of what type of data it is, you are not trying to capture all of the information, but the most important parts within the graph. So that's a really important factor to remember. Your language is going to be important as well. So I've written here 2 examples where you can see the sort of language that you would be using. So by now, if you've been practicing, you should have kind of graph data language that is typically associated with this type of information. Phrasal verbs and collocations are really, really useful. So that should kind of be in your bank of knowledge anyway by now. So as you can see, and you can read here, feel free to pause the video at any point. This kind of succinctly describes what's happening in the graph. Something else to remember is that, as I said at the start, you're trying to capture the most important points. So it's not about telling a story contextually about why this might have occurred in the data. It's literally just about what you see. So you might think it's beneficial to kind of lean into that and say, oh, this might be because at this part of the day, people are typically working or attending to kind of personal duties or looking after their children, whatever it might be. It's not kind of relevant to the graph. They only want you to discuss what you can see in front of you. So make sure that you stick to that and you don't include any additional context. It's really important to mention the most important comparison. So again, it's not about trying to include everything, but it is about trying to include the most important points. So here I've listed some of them, and which you can read here. And I would advise that when you're planning, which I'll get to in a second, when you're planning, it would be a good idea to kind of note down some initial, very obvious comparisons that you would use. Because if you miss those obvious comparisons, it may seem like you've maybe misunderstood the task or the question, and that can make your score suffer. So I want to draw your attention to this graph here. What I've done, as you can see, is just to differentiate it between 2 colours. Obviously, I can at this point on my laptop, but on the day itself, you can distinguish differences in a similar way with arrows and kind of circling on the graph what really sticks out to you. And this could be a really useful thing to do in your planning stage, that you see the graph, you've got it in front of you, and you think, okay, what is really noticeable here? What is the trajectory? What is the kind of behavior of the graph like? So I've done that here, which can help you build and tell your story. So that's something that I would advise that you do as well, just to really help distinguish the differences between the data. And lastly, just some tips. So as I've just said, mark on the graph the areas in which we're talking about in planning time. So visually kind of make those distinctions on your graph. If you prefer to write in note form on your graph, kind of sharp increase, drastic decline, steady growth, kind of those terms that are kind of specific to visual data, then you could do that instead. I think it just depends what you prefer and how you think. It's always good to note down useful language in terms of language associated with diagrams, collocations, phrasal verbs. If you've got a kind of a list that you could just quickly get out onto paper, that would be great, so that you're going to use them. I also recommend to tick off the points as you use them. So if you've made certain points, or even here, like I've marked out, once you know that you've mentioned that, you can just tick it off. So in the last few minutes, you can clearly see, okay, I've mentioned everything that I set out to do. And lastly, don't try to cram in every bit of data. As I said at the start, it's really about pointing out the most obvious, important things rather than trying to cover everything. Be selective, be succinct, and pick out what you're going to talk about. Hope that was useful. Thank you for watching again.